It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon in our suburban neighborhood. The kind of day where everything feels normal, until one of the most shocking moments of our lives unfolded right in front of us. A neighbor, angry over a loose cat, pulled a gun on my wife. But little did she know, my wife isn't just any woman. She's a firearms instructor, trained to handle exactly this kind of situation. What happened next turned everything upside down. You won't believe how it ended. We lived in a quiet, picturesque neighborhood, the kind of place where the sun seemed to always shine and the world moved slowly. People knew each other's names, waved from their front porches, and talked about their plans for the weekend. My wife, Laura, and I had settled into this peaceful rhythm, along with our newly adopted kitten, Whiskers. Whiskers wasn't just a cat. He was a ball of energy, running all over the place, enjoying his newfound freedom. And like any cat, he had a tendency to wander. One afternoon, as Laura and I enjoyed a warm coffee on our front porch, the unthinkable happened. There was a knock at the door. Standing there was Karen, a woman who had made it clear she took her HOA duties very seriously. We didn't know her well, but everyone in the neighborhood knew she was always quick to enforce the rules, even if it meant stepping on a few toes. "I'm here about your cat," Karen said, her tone sharp. "It's been roaming around, and it's causing problems in my yard. It's defecating in my garden, and I'm tired of it. This is the second time. Either you keep it inside, or I'll call animal control and have it taken away." At first, I was taken aback. It was just a cat, after all. But Laura, being the calm one, reassured Karen that we would make sure Whiskers stayed indoors from now on. I thought that would be the end of it. After all, it was just a cat, and Karen was just a neighbor. But I was wrong. The next morning, as I was heading out to work, I got a call from Laura. Her voice was calm, but there was a sense of urgency. "Karen's outside," Laura said. "Whiskers got out again, and she's furious. She's yelling at me from the yard." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I rushed home, wondering what I'd find. When I arrived, I saw Laura standing on the front porch with Karen. But what stopped me in my tracks was the sight of a gun. Karen had a gun. My mind raced. Was this really happening? The moment I stepped onto the porch, Karen turned to face me, her eyes wide with fury. "This is the last straw," she shouted. "Your cat has been running loose, and I've had enough of it. I warned you, and now I'm going to take matters into my own hands." I froze for a moment. I didn't know what to say or do. My wife was standing just a few feet away, and this woman was pointing a gun at her over a cat. A cat. But Laura wasn't afraid. Not one bit. I looked at her, trying to make sense of what was happening. My wife stood tall, staring directly at Karen, her body calm and poised. "Karen," she said slowly, her voice steady, "put the gun down. We don't want any trouble." Karen's eyes flickered nervously. The power she thought she had was slipping away as she saw the calm resolve in Laura's stance. "You don't understand," Karen said, her voice shaking. "This is for your own good." Laura didn't flinch. I said, "Put the gun down." The standoff seemed to stretch on forever, though in reality, it was just a matter of seconds. My heart pounded as I watched my wife. She wasn't just talking, she was waiting, calculating every possible outcome in her mind. She had been trained for this. And then, in one fluid motion, Laura reached for her concealed carry, her hand moving with the precision of someone who had been trained to handle a firearm in high-pressure situations. "I won't ask you again," Laura said, her voice low, but with an edge that cut through the air. For a moment, I thought Karen was going to fire, but then she hesitated. The reality of the situation hit her like a freight train. The woman who had come to intimidate us was now standing there, trembling, realizing she was in over her head. Karen slowly lowered the gun, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't mean it," she stammered. "You shouldn't have come here threatening my family," Laura replied, her voice unwavering. At that moment, Karen turned and walked away, muttering under her breath. I don't know if she was embarrassed, scared, or just regretting her choices. But she left. We filed a report with the HOA the next day, but the damage had already been done. Karen's reign of terror over the neighborhood had ended. She was never seen again. We weren't just homeowners anymore. We had learned that standing up for yourself, and knowing how to defend your family when it mattered was no longer just a choice. It was a necessity. That incident changed everything. It wasn't just about a loose cat anymore. It was about power, control, and knowing when to stand your ground. And in that moment, we realized, no matter the situation, we would never be intimidated again. Karen's departure didn't bring the closure we expected. That evening, after the confrontation, Laura and I sat in silence. The events of the day replayed in my mind, but the overwhelming feeling wasn't just shock. It was confusion. How had it escalated so quickly? How had Karen, someone we'd never had a major issue with, reached the point of threatening my wife with a gun? I looked over at Laura, who was sitting across from me, calm as always, but I could see the tension in her eyes. This wasn't just about the cat. It was deeper. "I've been thinking," Laura said, breaking the silence. "Something doesn't add up. Why would she risk so much over a cat? It's not just about the cat, is it?" I nodded, agreeing with her instincts. It didn't make sense. In fact, it didn't feel like it had anything to do with Whiskers at all. It felt personal, like Karen had been holding on to some kind of anger for far too long. But why? We barely interacted with her. Our lives had been peaceful until now. The next day, I tried to reach out to some of the neighbors. I needed to know if anyone else had experienced the same kind of behavior from Karen. But what I found was more unsettling than I expected. A couple of neighbors mentioned similar complaints, not about cats, but about Karen's overbearing attitude toward the community. Apparently, she had been pushing the HOA's rules to their limits, almost to the point of obsessiveness. From what I gathered, Karen wasn't just enforcing the rules. She was manipulating them, using her position to control the way people lived in the neighborhood. It sounded like Karen had been on a power trip for a long time, and now, it seemed, she had taken it a step too far. Laura and I knew something had to be done. This wasn't going to be a one-time confrontation. We weren't just going to sit back and let her bully us or anyone else. A few days later, we noticed that Karen had been talking to some of the other residents again. This time, though, it wasn't about the cat. She seemed to be stirring up some kind of trouble with the HOA board members. We didn't know the specifics, but the whispers in the neighborhood were hard to ignore. It was becoming clear that Karen wasn't just some random troublemaker. She had a hidden agenda, and I couldn't shake the feeling that her behavior wasn't going to end until she had control over everyone in this neighborhood. Laura and I decided it was time to take action. We spoke to a few more neighbors, slowly piecing together the pattern of Karen's behavior. It was like a web. Karen had a way of manipulating everyone around her, pulling strings, influencing decisions. There were rumors of her involvement with a few HOA board members who had been making questionable decisions in the past. It didn't take long for us to realize that Karen wasn't just some isolated case. She was a player in a bigger game, one that we hadn't even been aware of until now. I was beginning to feel the weight of the situation. What had we gotten ourselves into? It felt like something much darker was lurking beneath the surface. Karen wasn't just a neighbor with a grudge. She had a vendetta, and it seemed like we were the next targets. It was time to dig deeper. The next week, I decided to do some research on Karen's past. I needed to know who she really was and how far her reach went. What I uncovered sent chills down my spine. Karen had been involved in a number of shady business deals in the past. Nothing that would get her in serious trouble, but enough to show that she wasn't someone who played by the rules. It seemed like she had a pattern of using her position of power to get what she wanted, no matter the cost. One of the most surprising things I found was that she had been previously banned from another HOA for similar reasons, trying to control the lives of her neighbors, using manipulation and intimidation to bend everyone to her will. She had been let go after a scandal involving a major financial conflict of interest. But it seemed she had found a new neighborhood to sink her claws into. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. It was something much bigger. Laura and I knew we had to stop her before she destroyed everything we cared about. We began to gather evidence, documenting every questionable move Karen made. We talked to more neighbors, each of whom had a story to tell about her manipulation. But as we dug deeper, it became clear that this wasn't going to be as simple as confronting her directly. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was dangerous. But we weren't backing down. Not anymore. A few days later, Laura and I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. We knew it was our chance to finally take control of the situation. If Karen had been using her influence to manipulate the board members, this was our opportunity to expose her. We walked into the room, my heart pounding, but Laura's calm demeanor reassured me. She was ready for whatever came next. Karen was already there, sitting near the front, as usual. She shot us a glance as we entered, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. I could feel the tension building. This was it, the moment we would confront her once and for all. As the meeting started, it was clear that Karen was trying to steer the conversation toward the issues she cared about. But Laura, with her calm, authoritative voice, began asking questions about recent decisions made by the HOA board. Her questions were smart, direct, and impossible to ignore. She wasn't attacking anyone, but she was making sure everyone in the room knew exactly what had been going on behind closed doors. The room grew tense as Laura's questions hit home, and it didn't take long for the others to start questioning Karen's actions. People were beginning to realize that her behavior wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about her controlling the neighborhood, manipulating the HOA for her own gain. I could see the cracks forming in Karen's carefully constructed facade. Her hands began to tremble, and her face reddened with anger. She wasn't used to being questioned. She wasn't used to losing control. But she wasn't ready to give up just yet. As the meeting came to a close, Karen stormed out of the room, furious. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen had made too many enemies, and now people were starting to talk. It was only a matter of time before the full truth came to light. But we had just begun to scratch the surface. Laura and I knew that this was only the beginning of the fight. The HOA wasn't just a neighborhood association. It was a system that Karen had been using to feed her need for control. And now, with our knowledge, we had the power to turn the tables. As we walked out of the meeting, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what we were up against. Karen wasn't going to back down easily, but neither were we. And we weren't going to let her win. The days following the HOA meeting were filled with tension. Karen, visibly humiliated, retreated into the shadows, but it was clear she was far from finished. We could feel her watching us every time we stepped outside. Laura and I tried to carry on with our daily lives, but the looming threat of Karen's next move was like a constant weight on our shoulders. It wasn't long before we learned Karen had gone on the offensive. The following week, we started hearing rumors from neighbors that she was trying to rally a group of disgruntled homeowners to her side, claiming that we were the troublemakers. She was spinning her own version of the events, painting herself as the victim and us as the antagonists. Her tactic was clear: divide the community, turn people against us, and regain control. But this time, the stakes were higher. Laura and I knew we had to act fast before Karen could successfully manipulate the board and sway the other residents. We needed to gather more evidence, something irrefutable, to finally expose her once and for all. The situation escalated when one of our neighbors, Lisa, came forward with a story. Lisa had been one of the first to experience Karen's wrath and was now ready to speak up. She explained that Karen had been secretly pressuring the HOA board members to make certain financial decisions that favored her personal interests. What's more, she had used intimidation tactics to silence anyone who dared to question her. Lisa's testimony was the missing piece of the puzzle. It was clear now that Karen wasn't just controlling the neighborhood through petty rules. She was using her position to make money, and the entire community was being played. Laura and I met with a few key neighbors, including Lisa, to strategize. We knew we couldn't just sit back and wait for Karen to make her next move. The plan was simple: expose her manipulations publicly and get the HOA board on our side before she had a chance to take control again. The next meeting was fast approaching, and we were ready. This time, we weren't going to let Karen spin the narrative. With Lisa's testimony and the evidence we had gathered, we were armed with the truth. We knew that the board members had to listen, that they couldn't ignore the pattern of corruption and manipulation that had been going on under their noses. As the meeting began, Karen was once again front and center, her smug expression hiding the panic that was brewing beneath the surface. She didn't know what was coming. We weren't just showing up with questions this time. We were showing up with answers. One by one, we presented the evidence, financial documents, emails, and most damning of all, Lisa's testimony about the secret deals Karen had been orchestrating. The room was silent as the facts came to light. Karen, her face draining of color, tried to defend herself, but her words were empty. The truth was too clear to ignore. By the end of the meeting, Karen had been ousted from her position on the HOA board. The residents were shocked, but they also felt a sense of relief. The power she had held over the neighborhood was finally broken. But as Karen stormed out of the room, I knew this wouldn't be the last we'd hear from her. People like her don't go down easily. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Still, for the first time in weeks, I felt like we had won a major victory. Laura, calm as always, turned to me with a small smile. "We did it," she said quietly. "We did," I replied, feeling the weight lift off my chest. As we left the meeting, a thought crossed my mind. We'd learned a valuable lesson, that standing up for what's right was never easy, but it was always worth it. And no matter how dark things seemed, the truth would always find a way to come out. If you found this story interesting, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned for more incredible tales from real-life experiences.